Like I wasn't going to school with whatever the new, well, down in Charleston we called them Willie D's, but they were Air Force Ones.
Willie
You done
D's?
heard Willie D's is what we called them back home.
Wow.
Like, later I moved to Virginia, so I hear people call them DC's or Uptowns.
Oh yeah.
But where I'm from, we used to call them Willie D's. I took a bunch of my mom's sugar and a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of my mom's Kool-Aid, and I mixed it up and I put it in small little bags in containers. And I'm sixth grade, so I'm what, 11 or something like that.
Right.
Put it in a little box. I took it to school and I sold it.
You was hitting the block with Kool-Aid.
I sold it, bro. I sold it, bro, and they was buying it. And then my first Nas project, like, I didn't hear Illmatic. Right? I'm not from
Right.
that. Like,
Right.
my first Nas album was Godson when Made You Look
Wow.
came out. You see what I'm saying? That was the first Nas
Wow.
album
So
that I heard.
hold on, man. Why do you think people have issues with Kanye West doing gospel or
Yeah.
a Snoop doing a gospel album? So who would you consider the CHH GOAT? Like,
Oh man. Yeah, I think.
Yo, it's your boy Zay, and I want to let all y'all know it's no cap no more. It's no fluff TV. Check it out.
Speaking on the 919, your career to the side. Cackalacky style. Cackalacky style. Cackalacky style.
what up, y'all? Welcome to No Fluff TV. I am the P, and I have a special guest on right now. I know y'all not used to me doing the Zoom interviews, but I had to make it happen either way, man, because he has a new project coming out, I believe, soon, right?
Yeah, soon.
Already dropped a single called Throne featuring Dre Murray and I think Lex Devine,
Yep.
right?
Lex Devine.
Right. It's Mr. Jeremiah Bligen. That's correct, right?
That's correct. You got
Cool.
it. First try, you got it.
Yeah. So, I wanted to get you on, man, because I say this is a platform for all of NC, for everybody, man. No matter who you are, you definitely have a platform to come up with, share whatever you have going on, share your thoughts or whatever. So I'm glad to have you on, man. Been, fan of your music, I know your music, and just, we even talked, I have met you, you said 6.5 years ago.
Yeah.
So, wow. So that's great. And, what's crazy is I'm looking at the amount of gray that I got going on, and you don't have no gray. So
I got two of them. I got one trying to come in right here, and one that peeks up right there
oh
every
man,
now and then. Yeah,
I'm
they
telling
coming.
you, man. I hit 35, and it just no 33, and it just started to
Mm,
take over, eyelashes, nose, wherever, like. And so it's coming, man. It's coming.
yeah.
But it's great to be older. So you doing all right today?
I'm doing well, man. Just want to just thank you for opening up the platform, man. I think it's always really dope when people take the time to shine a light on what different artists are doing, and using their own resources and their own energy, just out of their love for any particular thing, to build something up. So
Right.
I think it's dope, man. Salute to you, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. No problem. So the first question, man, we're gonna jump right into it, man. How offended? How offended were you when you heard the Jay-Z verse on God Did?
Not very.
Okay.
Honestly, not not very. I
Okay.
think that a lot of times your offense to something is usually wrapped up in your expectations of a certain person or thing. You know,
Okay.
um, not to say that if you have zero expectations of something, you can't be offended, because you certainly can, right?
Right.
But if I expect you, you know, to slap somebody every 5 seconds, then I'm not going to be as offended when you actually slap somebody. you
Right.
know, I'm expecting it. So it's like, that's who you are. You know, I understand your posture, your position is
Right.
not the same as mine. And so, you know, I'm not your standard anyway, for me to be too offended. You just doing what you always do.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so
Right.
I think that Jay-Z, especially over the last, I want to say 10 years or so, you can clearly see his growth and leanings towards more of a Muslim 5%er um, type of ideology, you know, and he's been
Right.
pretty consistent in his um, aversion to anything Christian, you know, and he even shared why that is in some sense with his personal experience with
Right.
ministers, Christian ministers. So I get it. You know what I'm saying? I get it.
Right.
Um, definitely can do without it. You know what I mean? Like, you know, save your disrespect, you know, for something else. But at the same
Right.
time, you know, we're all disrespectful to God. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
In our own little ways, whether or not
Right.
we using the name of the Lord flippantly or, you know, whatever flippantly, or, you know, just with our lives and the things that we choose to do and not to do and say. So,
Right.
you know, so yeah, not much.
I think that's a great answer, man. I've always wondered why people got so like entangled in that whole thing, man. And this whole, Illuminati and
Yeah.
all of that, that type of thing. And, I think a few years ago I decided, just to instead of trying to in a sense, defend, certain things that these artists do. Just more like, man, if it's walking like a duck, and it's talking like a duck,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
it just may be a duck, man. So
Hmm.
um, I think that's a great answer, man. So I got over there. I wanted to see what your response was with that, man. But just talk about growing up in Johns Island, South Carolina.
Oh man, let me tell you, the older I get, the more I look back on where I'm from more fondly. You know, I think that because growing up there, I experienced a lot of just pain, you know, poverty. You know, my pops was an alcoholic. We were a family of five. My pop, my mom, and then my two sisters and I. You know, and me being the youngest, you know, you of course have to deal with a lot of lack, a lot of pain, and dealing with that type of situation when you have someone that's verbally abusive, and
Mm,
sometimes could get physically abusive, and someone that really as a man wasn't doing the things that he's supposed to do. You know what I mean? As a husband and as a father, as somebody who's responsible and accountable for a family unit. You know, and so everything that came along with that as a little boy. You know what I mean? Seeing that and being poor and knowing that I was poor and you
mm,
know and really most of us were poor, right?
right,
Like most of us were poor back where I'm from.
right.
But it's like even of the poor, we were like poor,
Mm.
you know. And
And when
so
you say
going,
poor, what do you mean by that? Like,
so I didn't have name brand shoes until I was wearing Payless shoes in the sixth grade, bro.
mm,
You know, we our first the first home that we lived in as a family together was an abandoned trailer that
mm,
they found in the woods that they
mm,
pulled out from the woods with some help and
mm,
kind of rehabilitated it. And by rehabilitate, I mean clean. They just
mm,
cleaned it up
right,
and put it on a little plot of land that my granddad used to farm on,
mm,
and moved us in. So, you know, when it
wow,
was cold, we would put the oven door open to heat up the house,
right,
right? Because we didn't have heat. You know, we didn't
right.
have city water, so we had a little pump outside that pumped the water, and
Oh,
sometimes
that
that water
well,
was brown, that well water. You
mm-hmm.
know what I mean? So we in Carolina, so most people are gonna know what I'm talking about. You know,
Right,
like sometimes you gotta boil that water to get
mm-hmm.
some stuff up out of it to be able to use it.
Right,
You know, and so we didn't. We my mom, you know, worked herself night and day to take care of us. You know, to make sure
wow,
we had something to eat. You
mm,
know, that when the mice didn't eat through the bottom of the cereal boxes, But we had a little bit of cereal or some bread that sometimes we had to scrape the moles off to eat. Like we really lived that way. Like not like every now and then, you know what I mean? Like we lived that way. Like I wasn't going to school with whatever the new, well, down in Charleston, we called them Willie D's, but they were Air Force Ones.
Willie D's?
Willie D's is what we called them back home. Like, later I moved to Virginia, so, I hear people call them DCs or Uptowns, but where I'm from, we used to call them Willie D's. And so I didn't go to school with those. Jordan, and definitely not Jordans, right?
Oh,
but there were people that did, what I'm saying? But we didn't. I'm the kid with we wore school uniforms, and my mom had to take out loans to get us school uniforms. You know what I mean? Like we drove a car that squealed. And so when we pulled up, everybody knew it was us with the paint scraped off of the top hood. And we had to reach our hands outside of the door, outside of the window in order to open the door up.
Talk about it.
You said like, really poor, not like, oh, I don't have this thing that I want. So we struggling. Like, we were really struggling, bro.
Right.
And so growing up in that environment, a lot of times I would associate the pain and the disappointment from that experience to my upbringing and my location. But there was also a lot of richness there too, that when I look back on a lot of the church culture and even though we didn't have a whole lot of money, my mother definitely did not live like someone who was morally poor or morally bankrupt. It wasn't a moral free for all, even though my dad, was leaning on alcohol to deal with his trauma, and so growing up, I can look back and kind of contextualize those things. When you're an adult, you learn to not centralize yourself as much as you do when you're a kid or a child. When you're a child or you're immature, even as an adult, you make everything about you.
Right.
And so, but when you get a little bit older, you live a little bit longer, you try to look back and see things from other people's perspective and try to understand what they've been through, what they went through to feel like they needed to do that, or to do certain things. And so now I can look back and I can appreciate, certain aspects of my upbringing and look back even fondly on certain experiences, and to make sure I'm not discarding a whole part of who I am because it was associated with pain, you know what I mean? But to embrace all of those things, the good that was produced through that pain and the bad things, but also just the things that were good, as well. So yeah, man.
So how did you process the pain that you were feeling of growing up poor? I'm sure like many of us, especially growing up, I'm assuming you grew up in the 90s?
Yep.
So, the kids then, they were harsh. We didn't have social media, so we got it. So like, I remember going to school 5th grade with Payless shoes. I can't remember the name of them, but they looked like, they were like the fake felines, the felines with the strap. I had those. So how did you deal with that pain and that frustration of not having and being joked on or whatever that may have come with not having?
Yeah. I was angry, bro. I was angry, and I would compare it to my middle sister, she's just 3 years older than mine, so we were closer in age. But my middle sister didn't really process our situation in the same way. Like she was more so looking at a lot of the positive things, you know what I mean, that we had. We had each other, you know what I mean? We laughed a lot, to cope with a lot of things. Like you see it on Black Twitter, like we make everything a joke, bro. Like, like we laugh, and laugh is a way that we cope with things that are painful to us. But for some reason, even as a child, and I'm talking elementary school, I was keenly aware that we were poor. I didn't have stuff. And, people would say stuff and let me know. And I internalized it, in a way that made me really hate my dad, bro. Like, and I saw him as the source of, everything that was wrong in my life. You know, right or wrong, that's what I did. You know,
Right.
and so I developed a deep-seated hatred for him. And I
Mm.
know, and a lot of people, you know, who never met their dad or didn't have their dad around at all, you know, I can relate to a lot of a lot of how they felt or how they feel, because even though we lived in the same space, he never added anything to me.
Mm.
You know, like I lived in the same house with him for 15 years, and I've had a deeper conversation with you in the last 10 minutes that I ever had with him in
Jeez.
15 years. You
Wow.
understand?
Right.
And so he was around, you feel me? But he was always completely drunk or disengaged completely. Those
Mm.
were his two modes, you
Right.
know, drunk and belligerent and engaging with us in a combative way,
Mm-hmm.
or completely disconnected, you
Right.
know, and silent. And so I internalized that, you know,
Okay.
and I was angry. I would get into fights and get put out of class in elementary school, getting into fights, getting written up,
Right.
pink slips, and you know, I would be on the principal's list, getting straight A's and getting sent out to the office and suspended for 3 days for fighting.
Right.
You know, because I was just mad, bro.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was just mad, and as I got older, of course, once you start getting exposed to different music, you hear things in music and lifestyles, you get around older people, you
Mm-hmm.
start seeing, oh, maybe there's a way for me not to be poor. And so it leaves you open and susceptible to, you know, trash things that you shouldn't be even considering or thinking of,
Right.
you know, that I would consider it. And
Right.
so I was mad, I
Yeah.
hated him, and I felt justified in my hatred of him. And I would let people know how I felt, those that were close to me. You
Right.
know, I didn't bite my tongue concerning my hatred for him.
Mm.
And so disengaging in school after some time,
Right.
starting to skip classes, you know. Oh, I'll never be like him. You know,
Right.
I'll never be a drunk who don't take care of his family. I'm 14 years old,
Right.
getting some alcohol to drink. What?
Wow.
You know, going
Yeah.
to a
Yeah.
little party and hanging out late at night you got no business to be at. You know,
Right.
but people don't care nothing about you for real.
Yeah.
um you know, but that's what happens, you know, that deep rooted, that pain and that hatred, you know,
Yeah.
it starts to make you into something that you never wanted to be, and B, never imagined you would be.
Okay.
So yeah, that's really how I coped with it, just as unhealthy as a lot of people you know
Right.
do, you know,
Did
as a
you
young person.
did you ever get into, like, any hustling? Like, did it turn into anything, joining gangs? Did it?
So funny story, right? No, but I was headed there.
Okay.
And I remember even in either I was in sixth or seventh grade, and my sister and I would do this thing, and you probably done it before, where you would take some Kool-Aid, the Kool-Aid packet, and you mix it up with sugar, and you don't put water in it, you just kind of lick it, and you eat it, and it's like a tart little sugary
Yeah.
treat, you know, that
Right.
you have. I put I took a bunch of my mom's sugar and a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of my mom's Kool-Aid, and I mixed it up and I put it in small little bags in containers. And I'm sixth grade, so I'm what, 11 or something like that.
Right.
Put it in a little box. I took it to school and I sold it.
You was hitting the block with
I
Kool-Aid.
sold I
Talk about
sold
it.
it, bro. I sold it, bro. And they was
Right.
buying it.
Wow.
And they were buying it. People were walking around the school with blue mouths and red mouths,
Wow.
and you know, they was coming to me to get it. I've had a couple of people in my class that would sell it for me too and bring the money back to me. True story, bro. And
So you didn't hit the block with crack. You hit them with the
I
other
hit
crack.
I hit the school with Kool-Aid, bro. Listen. Listen. And so somebody else started to do it.
Oh.
And they got caught and they
Mm.
got in trouble and they ratted me out. And so
Wow.
the vice principal ends up calling me in, you know. So I got my little box, my wooden box with my money and my Kool-Aid in it.
Wow.
And you know, I get called to the carpet. I'm like, yeah, I did it. You know what I mean? Like, you know,
That's crazy.
I've never been a liar. So if you caught me and I did something, I'm gonna say I did it, right?
Right.
And so they called my mom's up and we had a big meeting and my mom was pissed, and I had just got she finally was able to save up enough for me to get a Sega Genesis. Or was it a Sega or a PlayStation 1? One of them. I don't know. It was some game system. I think it might have been the PlayStation 1 at that time.
Right.
And she had just gotten it for me after I like kind of begged her for it for years. And she knew how much that thing meant to me. And so she knew how dangerous what I was doing was. Luckily, the principal didn't expel me because it wasn't something dangerous that I was selling.
Right.
But they both knew how serious it was, so I got suspended, of course. And my mom was like, I'm gonna punish you for a year. You're not going a year, bro. 365 days. And
That's crazy.
She took my game system. She took my viewing privileges. So whatever little thing you like to watch and do, you're not doing that.
Wow.
And she stuck to it. And by her sticking to that, I think it deferred me a little bit for some time. Because once I got things back, because let me say this. During that time, I started doing music stuff more. I started paying more attention to music and writing my first lyrics, and all of that stuff was during that time. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And so by the time, I get all of my privileges back or whatever, I'm deterred a little bit from trying to go down that path,
Okay.
But yet and still, a few years later down the road, I'm starting to think of, okay, I'm gonna start selling weed, because at this point, I got cousins who sold dope, at that point, right? So it's not like I'm like in the suburbs and I'm not around this stuff. Like I'm in a car when my cousin who's 4 months younger than me is handing me the drugs to give to somebody in the sale in the car. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not, I'm around drug use, around alcohol abuse, and all of these things all around. So I'm like, you know what, man, I'm gonna just start small. When I got my first little summer job, in the 9th grade summer, I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna take some of this money and buy some weed, buy an ounce or something like that.
Okay.
And see if I can just start. Yeah, like do little small bags and get my feet wet. And like I had a little plan in my head of how I was gonna grow that.
Yeah.
And do these different things. And thankfully, bro, thankfully I got interrupted because I was gonna do it.
You say you were
gonna do it. I was going to do it. And thankfully my sister was very worried about me, my oldest sister, who had moved to Virginia, to Norfolk, Virginia. She got married and moved out.
Okay.
And she was very worried about me because I was fighting this at this point, I'm getting into fights and around the neighborhood. I'm flunking in my classes. She knows how I feel, how angry I am. She can see it. And she was heavy in the church and stuff. And she called me. She was always checking on me directly and with my mom. And my sister and I went to go visit her one summer. And it wasn't a summer. It was a winter. It was like right before Christmas. So it was during that fall, winter break time. And we went to go visit her, and she was just like, what do you think about coming to live with me? And I was like, I don't know, because at this point I got my little friends, we rapping together, we coming up with some plans, to do some stuff with not with just music, but my little drug plan that I got.
Right.
I'm talking to somebody else about doing it with me now at this point. So I got some little plans, I got my little crew and people that I work with, I mess with.
Right.
And so when I got back home, I sat with it, you know what I mean, and just really thought about it for a while. And my mom was actually very hesitant as well because I was her baby, you know what I'm saying? And she really she took her responsibilities very serious, in terms of raising me. And so,
So you were still in South Carolina during this time?
Yep, still in South Carolina.
Wow.
And so I basically it was like, you know what? I'm gonna try something different because this is not working. Like I'm getting older now, so of course you get older. You mid-swing puberty. You feeling yourself like my dad. We're getting more physical. Like I'm being now physically aggressive towards you when you come to me. You know what I'm saying? Like
You say you was more physical with your dad?
Yeah. So when he comes in and he's drunk and he's trying to rah with me and my moms and like I'm giving it back. I'm like, nah, yo, chill. Like, if he grabbing me, I'm pushing him away from me. One time I extended that fist and hit him. You know what I mean? Like, because
Wow.
it was that volatile at that
Wow.
point. And it wasn't like we were fist fighting or anything like
Right.
that, but there were situations like that would
It got
happen.
real. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you not gonna be up here coming and messing with us, and you not doing anything but adding confusion to our lives. You know, like I went out and tried to buy a gun. I was $25 short. So thank God for that $25 short, and
Right.
that the dude wasn't trying to cut me no discount. It's probably
Right.
because he knew me and he knew my sister. He was like, "Man, you don't need no gun, man."
Yeah.
But yeah, I had it in my hand, was checking it out, was like, "How much you want for it?" I was a little bit short, but I was going to get it eventually. And
How much
he was,
was it back then?
man, he was charging me 1.25. So he was only charging me
Wow.
125, but I was broke, so I ain't had
Yeah.
that yet, you know.
Yeah.
But I was saving.
Yeah.
And I was getting it with the simple intent of, this dude is off of his rocker and he coming here, I'm shooting him, bro.
Wow.
Like, because I hated him that much, bro. It wouldn't you didn't get me a PlayStation, so I'm mad, angry.
Right.
It was like, I really hate you because you're the source of all of my anger and pain and everything that
Yeah.
I was getting into. You know, it's your fault. You don't love me or my mom,
Right.
you know? And so thankfully I couldn't buy that. But my sister really pushed to get me out of there.
Right.
And so I made that decision to move, and took some working on my mom, you know, but she eventually relented and said, you know what, go ahead, I'll let you go.
Right. And this
And
was in high school?
this was in high school. At this point, I'm in the 11th grade. I'm in the 11th grade. And so I moved there, and that February was in the middle of the school year. I packed up my stuff and got on a Greyhound bus, and I moved to Virginia.
Wow.
And I never looked back since then in terms of my life, my life and, what I was carrying,
Yeah.
because for me, it was not just a physical move, but it was a spiritual one too. Because when I visited them that fall, and I went to church with them, you know what I mean? And I heard the word, you know what I mean? I was praying. And my mom always drugged me to church as a young boy. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I've always had a awareness, and kind of a general understanding of what's going on from a spiritual aspect when it comes to Christianity and church.
Right.
So I was always very open to that. It was just that, hey, so much crap is going on around me. It's like, that's backburn. And so
Right.
when I went to visit, it really got real for me in a different way, where I felt like my heart got kind of hit with something. It was something a little bit different.
Right.
And so when I moved, I asked the Lord for forgiveness, told him I follow him. And when I touched down in Virginia to
Right.
live there, I started doing the things that aligned with living a life that pursued after him.
Right.
Praying and shaving away the things that was in me and that I was carrying, starting with that pain,
Right.
and that unforgiveness, because I knew what it was, because someone confronted me about it. My sister's mother-in-law actually confronted me about it even as a young kid, like, hey, let me show you in the scriptures, like, you're supposed to honor your mother and father, for this is right. It didn't say honor your mother and father because they're right. It didn't
Right.
say honor your mother and father because they're perfect or they're good or they're worthy of it. It just
Right.
said honor them, respect them,
Mhm.
and I wasn't. I was disrespecting him with my mouth, even though I felt like he deserved it. I was justified because he wasn't worthy of it. But I saw my sin, you know what I'm saying? And it showed me like, nah, you wrong, man. And in addition to that, you look at your mind and what you thinking about doing, and seeing those things. I'm like, okay, Lord, I'm gonna give all of this to you.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna trust you with all of it. You take all of this pain and this hatred. I won't carry it no more. And I can remember being on a Greyhound bus and crying, bro, because I can just feel it. I could feel it was like gut wrenching, like something like fighting with me.
Right.
And I was choosing to let that stuff go, bro.
That's the
And
interesting
so
part
yeah.
about what you're saying too, right? The amount of anger you had, even to the point to where you're, even considering to shoot your dad, and to now you hear a word and you just say, all right, I'm gonna let this go, and start to honor
Mm-hmm.
this person that has caused this much, pain in my life, and so that had to be difficult for you to do.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and so that's interesting, man. But I want to switch it a little bit
Hmm.
and talk about your granddad. Like,
Yeah,
talk about his influence on you.
yeah. And so my granddad, man, it's crazy because my granddad was heavy in the church. He would preach on Sundays, and he and his siblings and relatives started a folktale group, so a shout group where they would sing, African folk tales and create spirituals. And they would sing as a group called the Moving Star Hall Singers,
Mm,
right? And they have music to this day that's in the Smithsonian Institute,
wow.
for their contribution, the folkways section of the institute. And so I was always hearing him sing, around them, and he would come and get me sometimes as a kid, and I would go work in the fields with him, and he would say, "Go, come on, put on some old clothes and let's go ahead out in the field." And I would be in there hot, sweaty, and dusty with the hoe. It's called a hoe, where
Yeah.
you would have to dig a hole, go on down in a line. We'd be out there all day long, then drop that and go get a bag of seeds. And now
Mm,
you walking down and dropping the seeds, then go back
mm,
and get the hoe and cover them all up. And, like
mhm,
that type of work. And you'd be exhausted and tired, but I appreciated it because
yeah.
somebody took some time to do something with me. You know what I mean? As a boy, to have him to take me along and do that
Right.
because he was so busy, and he had his own issues, what I mean, and things he was dealing with. He wasn't necessarily stepping in to try to be my dad or anything,
Mm,
so it wasn't as frequent as I would have hoped it was, but I do look back on certain things that he did do fondly. That sometimes he would bring us food, and
right.
he would always encourage me and say something positive like, "Oh yeah, you're going to be X, Y, and Z," which was very rare, for me. Like I didn't grow up with a lot of people telling me that I was going to be something positive,
Right.
you know. And
Would you say
so
this who
yeah,
you got your voice from?
yes,
Okay.
absolutely, and that's how I actually discovered that I had one as well,
Okay.
because I didn't grow up. I grew up. My mom made me sing in a youth choir, but I wasn't the person leading a bunch of songs and people saying, "Oh yeah, he can sing. Go do that."
Mhm.
Nah, that wasn't me at all. It
Got you.
wasn't until I got older, and as I was rapping and creating music, and I would listen to my granddad's music, I would mimic him, and
Mm.
from copying him, I was like, wait, I can actually do that, you
Okay.
know, because traditionally, I would say, even as I describe my voice, it's not like a traditional sounding voice, like, so,
Right.
oh, this person can blow, they can sing, like,
Right.
oh yeah, you want them to sing all these types of things. No, it sounded very different.
Right.
And so once I started practicing the
Mm-hmm.
things that he would do and realizing like, okay, I can pull that off. And my wife would be like, oh yeah, that doesn't sound too bad. And my siblings would tell me like, yeah, you sound just like him or whatever. And so
Right.
I'd start to naturally integrate that
You
and
didn't
work it
start singing
into.
for girls?
No, no.
I'm about to say, that was a girl getter right there. A guy that can sing.
I had the girl. I had already at that point, um, met my wife and
Okay.
got married really young. So
Okay.
it wasn't a getting. I didn't need to get a girl.
Got you.
You know what I mean? I had one.
How young did you get married?
I got married at 20.
Wow.
Yeah, I started being in a committed relationship with my wife when I was 18. I
Wow.
proposed to her at 19 and married her at 20. Haven't looked back.
Wow.
And
Wow.
10 times out of 10, I do it again.
Yeah.
10 times.
That's
Zero,
dope.
zero regret. Zero regrets at all when it comes to marrying who I married and marrying her when I married her. I do it the same way.
Mm.
Of course, along the way, there are things that I wish I had done better, or, as you have to go through those growing pains
Right.
as a young man and in a relationship, of course. But in terms of making that decision, to love her, to commit to her, and to build a life with her, one of the best things I could have ever done. You know, so yeah, man.
Yeah. So we're gonna play this game, man.
Mm-hmm.
Either or. I don't know if you watch Drink Champs or anything like that, but it's similar to the game that Nori plays on his.
Okay.
Either or. But the only difference is one, you don't have to drink if you choose both, but you can't choose both. That's the thing.
Gotcha.
You got to pick either or. It's just 10 of them, and we're gonna go through them as quick as possible. So we start off with the first one.
Okay.
This track was
French fries or tater tots?
Fries.
Okay.
Fries, but tots pretty strong coming in there.
Okay. Walmart or Target?
Walmart.
DC or Marvel?
Marvel.
Kevin Hart or Dave Chappelle?
Dave Chappelle. But I like Kevin.
Okay. Lecrae or KB?
Lecrae. But that's with a heap of respect for KB.
Right.
Because I mess with KB and what he does. Pretty headline.
All right. This one is gonna throw you off right here. You ready?
Yeah.
You get a hall pass, or your wife does.
Me or her? I would take the hall pass because I know I can control and not do anything. See?
Okay.
Because I know I don't want nobody else. So, and I know she doesn't either.
Right.
But still, I feel like it makes the most sense.
Right.
Because then I can just throw it in the fire and it's all over. So yeah,
Okay.
I'll take it and not use it.
Okay. Live a long time and no real connections with anyone. Or live a long life with everyone using you.
Ooh. I would probably say live and have people using me because I think that everybody gets used. And I think that understanding that the foundation of every relationship is that you're there to deposit something in somebody else. That if I'm in a relationship with you, then I expect you to want to use something that I'm bringing to the table. Be it something that's physical, a resource, or something in who I am that you're pulling from that makes it worthwhile. And so I would say I would rather have those connections because I feel like human beings are meant for connection. And I think that so often we have this perspective in relationships that what are you doing for me? What are you going to do for me? But really, if we're in these relationships and we want to have fruitful and healthy ones, we ask the question of how can I help you? How can I serve you? What can I deposit into your life? You know what I mean? To be beneficial.
Right.
And so I think everybody's being used. It's just when you word it that way, you know what I mean? You start to feel, some kind of way. But
Right.
everybody's being used for something. I think it's just about your perspective and, like we mentioned earlier, what your expectations are. In that exchange,
Right.
in that depositing, and so I'd rather be here and have those connections and be able to establish some boundaries for myself, around that usage.
Yeah. All right, next one. Die and find out that God is real. Or die and find out he isn't.
Die and find out that he is real.
Okay. Have a whole album produced by Timberland or by Dr. Dre.
Timberland.
That represent for the 7 cities, man.
Yeah. I'd have to go with Timbo.
Okay.
I like Dre though. I like Dre's work, but
Yeah. Okay.
there's a versatility that Timberland has. Not to say Dre isn't versatile because he is, but
Right.
there's something very unique about what Timberland can do, and we've seen him go into so many different pockets, you know,
Right.
from pop to R&B, you know, to hip hop. You've seen him be excellent in all of those spaces.
Yeah.
You know, so
And if you do one with Dre, it might not come out. So
that's true. But hey, Tink can tell you something about Timbo. Like, you know, you might not come out with him either.
right. That's true. That's true.
So I think that's possible for all of them producers.
Yeah.
In all of the situations. So
Yeah.
I'll go with Timbo.
All right, and the last one, man. 50K in cash or spend a day with Ye, formerly known as Kanye West.
Depends on what day it is.
Right.
Depends on what day and what yay am I getting. You know what I mean? Because really, I'd probably. I'm leaning more towards the day, because 50K is not a life changer. It's not a life changing sum for us. But you know, you put us in a different situation, and that 50K might be a life changer, and so my answer might be a little bit different.
Right.
And so when I consider the fact that the one day with Kanye and the 50K, neither of them could be life changing. Neither of them could be life changer. But I know that 50K is definitely not a life changer for me. You know what I'm saying? And so, be it, and by life changer, I don't just mean what I can get out of it, but what I can do with it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, I may be able to have some type of impact in that day, or I might be able to serve in that day. I might be able to learn something in that day, you know, that was worth, you know, 50,000. And that's not to say 50,000 isn't a lot of money, you know, and you can't do anything with it. Because I could do some things with it for sure.
Right. For sure.
Give me 50K right now. I'll take it, right?
I was about to say I can use it.
I'm already running in my mind. I'm running down in my mind right now about the things that I can do with it. So don't get it twisted, right?
Yeah.
But you know, when you balance those things, you know, as long as he's lucid, clear, and steady, you know, where it can be something beneficial and fruitful. Yeah, probably. I'm leaning more towards the day.
Okay. So, you know, we kind of left off earlier about, you know, how you moved to Virginia with your sister. You know, you start changing your life and everything. Like, and even you mentioned early on how you started to write your raps and stuff like that. So, like, talk about how you got into the music thing. Like, you know, who were you influenced by, you know, from hip hop, and you know, what made you say, I want to do this hip hop thing?
Yeah. And so, man, I growing up, I would, just like most people, you know, you sneak in and listen. Well, I had to sneak at first anyway, listening to the radio late night in my sister's room when she was at work or something like that. You know, my mom was at work, so she couldn't run in the room and tell me to turn that blues off. They used to call it blues. Turn that mess off.
Wow.
And so just listening to whatever was on the radio, you know, and it started that way. You had Z93 jams in Charleston. They would do the top 9 at 9. So we would listen to, I would go and listen to that. Me and my sister, my middle sister would listen to that, and we would record those songs. And eventually in middle school, we would get cable in middle school, and you start watching BET. You start watching, you know, MTV, TRL, Rap City, you know, eventually, then later 106 and Park and stuff. And so I consume everything that was coming. And I'm talking from pop, punk, rock on MTV to 3-6 Mafia, you know, on Rap City. And so I would begin to just sit down and write down the lyrics to the song, my favorite songs. I just copy them, just sit down and play the tape, write down what I can figure out, rewind the tape, write something else. And I would keep doing that until I had the entire, because, you know, we didn't have internet and Genius, right? Or Spotify, where you can click the mic on the thing and see all of the lyrics on the screen, right? And I would write them all down, you know, and then I'd start to practice them. So, man, I know how. So I would develop my rapping sense from mimicking, kind of like I mentioned earlier with singing and my granddad.
Right.
And at this point, I'm 10 years old
Right.
doing this. And so I would listen to No Limit was heavy at that time where I'm from in Charleston. So we listened to No Limit. We would listen to Pastor Troy. We would listen to 3 6 Mafia. You had, Cash Money coming up, you know what I mean, in the late 90s, mid to late 90s. So I would listen to Get It How You Live, the first Hot Boys album, Guerrilla Warfare around 98, right? Like I was listening to Silk the Shockers offbeat raps and Master P and Beat by the Pounds, a gajillion, projects that I could get my hands on anyway from like some cousins and stuff.
So you had like a heavy Southern hip hop influence. Okay.
Heavy. They were primary for me growing up. Like I would even listen to some people like, 3 6 Mafia signed a female MC called La Chat back in the day. And I had her album, like as a young kid. What the heck was I doing listening to that crap? But like I was listening to that too, so a very heavy Southern influence. And unfortunately, like dark and gangster stuff, which I was definitely not a gangster, but I was certainly dark, And so I gravitated to that type of thing in my youth. And I also, but again, I mentioned, I had an appreciation for other styles of music too.
Right.
So as I got exposed to BET and MTV, I started picking up on the Jay-Z's. I started picking up on the Nas's, and then 50 Cent came and Eminem, right? And so then it was like, oh, Eminem, and I got an Eminem tape, and the Marshall Mathers LP. I listened to like crazy, and then my first Nas project, like I didn't hear Illmatic, right? I'm not from that. Like my first Nas album was Godson when Made You Look came out. You see what I'm saying? That was the first Nas album.
So hold on, man. I gotta ask, like, like you're throwing me for. How old are you?
I'm 34, bro.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That explains a lot because I'm listening to you. I'm like, I didn't know you were that much younger. Like, 34. Okay.
Yeah.
So okay, I know exactly what you mean now.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean.
But I got that Godson though. I got it, and I started to really listen to Nas. And I knew that album front to back then, and I knew the Marshall Mathers LP front to back, and then the Eminem show. I knew that front to back, but I also knew Pastor Troy the SGB, right? I knew Master P's Bout It, right? I knew, I knew BG and Lil Wayne's first album. You know what I mean? Like Wobbity Wobbity Wayne. Not Squad Wayne, but Wobbity Wobbity Wayne.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like all of that stuff was all a part, of my formation in hip hop. I think you can sprinkle in a little bit of Outkast in terms of like their singles and stuff. But I wasn't like recording and pressing play and rewinding their stuff. It wasn't until later as an adult that I really grew a big appreciation for what they did. And so from Nas's Godson to all of that heavy down south influence stuff to Eminem and then 50 Cent. Definitely big influence. I did not like Jay-Z's music up into the Blueprint.
Wow.
I didn't even hear Reasonable Doubt until I was grown.
Wow.
I was like, oh yeah, this was fire. You know what I mean? But Big Pimpin' Jay-Z, I didn't mess with like that.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like I heard it on the TV, like Hard Knock Life. It's like, oh, okay, that's solid, that's dope. But it wasn't like, oh yeah, I gotta hear this new, I would rather hear this new Hot Boys. You know what I'm saying? Like that's where I was from, bro. I'm from the South. Through and through. So as T.I. came up, T.I., Ludacris, we listened to them, and so all of them kind of contribute to that. And so when you mixed in that with, the rock and roll people that I was listening to, some of the R&B stuff, and it's all just forming this big old gumbo of musical influence.
Right. So what was your first rap name?
Oh my gosh. I think my joint was, I was big into wrestling too, bro. And so I I loved wrestling. I couldn't watch Raw, of course, because I didn't have cable until
Right.
seventh, eighth grade. But they used to have like these little weekend recap shows,
Yeah.
like Live Wire or something like that on Saturdays, and I'd always tune into that. And then my cousin had cable, and so sometimes I would get to watch at his house. And
Okay.
so I loved the Undertaker back then, like
Oh.
dark and spooky stuff,
Yeah.
And so I think my first rap name was like Reaper or some mess like that. It was terrible.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
Reaper.
I think my first rap line was like something about Lil Reaper or something like that. So
Wow. So you
yeah,
don't remember your first rap?
no, not the whole thing.
Okay.
I remember my first bar though. It was
Okay.
like, let me see, Little Joe, aka Reaper, here to seek what you fear. I have you in a corner trapped up like a grizzly bear. Yeah.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I was like 10 years old.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
Okay.
I don't remember nothing else from that.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming you become a Christian, and then you're like, all right, I'm about to hit them with these gospel raps.
No, actually, like I become a Christian and I make the assumption that I would need to stop.
Mm.
And
Was that because of G. Craig Lewis?
no, but
Okay.
I did catch wind of him. And
Okay.
so at first it was just more like people have always associated rap with negativity.
Right.
And from everything that I was listening to, because remember, I wasn't listening to Tribe, I wasn't listening to Common Sense, I wasn't listening to certain conscious artists that may have painted a full spectrum of hip hop to me.
Right.
I was listening to trash, negative, gangster, misogynistic hip hop all the time. Right. And so that was my context for it. And so by the time I'm 16 years old, really trying to turn myself to faith and pursue the things of God, I was like, well, I'm gonna have to kiss that goodbye. Even though I really love music, you know what I mean? I love hip hop, but this is something that I need to put down. You know? And at the time, the church that I was in, my pastor was very, very, very heavy into arts, like the arts. She was big into theater. She was big into like dancing and stuff like that. Like she would write plays and stuff. And she was very adamant that whatever gift that you have as a creative, God gave it to you and you can use it to worship.
Okay.
And that helped me because it like, oh, okay, so God doesn't reject this. You know what I mean? He doesn't reject this aspect of who I am, but it's about what I do with it, And it feels like duh now, right?
Right.
but back then it wasn't so easy to grasp that you can use rap, that you can actually rap, you know what I mean, and be a believer and honor God that way. And so thankfully she contextualized that in a healthy way for me, and I was able to pick everything back up, shortly. But I did go probably like 3 to 6 months without doing anything, and that's like, oh man, that's no time at all. But it was a lot for me because I used to be rapping every day, writing raps all the time. Like I was in love with that joint, bro. So I was listening to it all the time. I was writing all the time, and so I was like, nah, I'm gonna just cut it off.
Wow.
And so, but once I kind of got that encouragement and understanding of like, no, like it's not your gift that's evil. It's not your gift that's wicked. It's what you choose to do with it that can be wicked.
Right.
And so I picked it up and I started writing things that was real to me. Right. And that's all. That's all that's all I would say I've ever done when it comes to the music that people have heard from me. Because of course you didn't hear Jeremiah's 14-year-old kill him, shoot him up, stupid raps, right? That I wasn't doing. But all of these raps all of this music has just been, this is who I am. This is what I'm going through. This is what I believe. This is what I feel. I've never endeavored to make a Christian rap. I've never tried to write a Christian song like, oh man, this has to be, in this way or that way because of who I am. It's like, nah, this is what it is because of who I am.
Right.
And wherever that lands me on your spectrum of how you judge and classify music, that's fine with me. But I'm not gonna tuck tail and not be who I am. It just is
Right.
what it is. Like if I'm sharing something of faith in my music, or if I'm worshiping or praying to God or crying out to God or telling about my life story, that's because that's what's real to me, right?
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's how I feel. And so that's what I try to authentically bring to the table,
Right.
as an artist. And so I started doing it then and hadn't
Yeah.
stopped.
So why do you think, with that, with what you're saying, I believe is real for a lot of artists. So why do you think people have issues with Kanye West doing
Mhm.
gospel or
Yeah.
a Snoop doing a gospel album? Like, why do
Mhm.
you think there's so much? I mean, there's some acceptance. Don't get me wrong, but
Hmm.
there is
Yeah. Yeah.
a pushback
Hmm.
of, hey, why is Kanye over here getting these Billboard stats because he did a gospel album? Or
Hmm.
why is, Tone and Fred Hammond on the Snoop album?
Yeah.
That type of thing. So, like,
Hmm. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of things that go into that.
mm,
And I'm not going to pretend to know why everybody feels a certain way, but I think I do know what contributes to it. And
okay.
I think that number one, we've seen throughout history where people, artists particularly, see an opportunity to leverage a population and culture, church culture and history, to benefit their music career, but they don't really um, plan to be drenched in the faith. You know what I'm saying? That it's supposed to represent. And so what you'll see is people come in, dabble in the waters, get the church's stamp and amen. Everybody buys this album, and it's a successful clog in their discography because they didn't fall completely off the cliff. And then it's a good bridge to the next thing that they do. And then you don't really see their faith manifesting as fruit in their life, you know,
Mm,
over time. You see them kind of doing the same things that they always have done. Like
mm,
even if you use somebody like R. Kelly as an example, right? Like he'll come in and do, "Oh, you save me," right? And his whole church album. And then right after that, you have a run of 6 albums that's just as trash as the 6 before the gospel album.
mhm,
See what I'm saying? And then you have a life of, you know, being a pervert and being an R&B thug and doing everything else that you want to do. You don't see
mhm.
that faith that he proclaimed bearing fruit in his life, in his character. And so I think a lot of people are very apprehensive, when they see people kind of jump ship and, see like, oh yeah, I'm this, I'm that. And like,
Right.
give it some time. But I also
Well,
think that the opposite extreme of that too contributes to it, because you have people who do just jump on board and they're just like super accepting, right? Like they just like, oh yes, they say they believe in Jesus, so we stamping them, we all on board with it. It's all good.
right.
Don't who are you to judge them and all X, Y, and Z, right? And you have this opposite end of the spectrum where people are being super accepting,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, I think that there needs to be a time for all of us when we come to faith, even when that faith is genuine, where you sit down somewhere and shut up.
Mhm,
Like go sit down somewhere, like detox
mhm,
from what you've had on your shoulders for so long. Like
mhm,
allow the word, allow the spirit to really work in you, and
mhm,
be okay with not being heard for a season.
mhm.
Be okay with not being, you know, the person on the platform.
Right.
Like be okay with not having who you were in your former life influence who you are in your new life. Like, are you still okay with being a believer if it means your name is never on the marquee again?
Mhm,
Are you okay with coming and sitting down in a pew and not getting in the pulpit and driving worship or driving a sermon? Can you be okay with that?
right.
And I think some of them would be, you know what I mean?
Mhm,
But I think
mhm,
that unfortunately, like Christians or believers would get so excited about, oh, somebody came to the faith. Yes. And
Mm-hmm.
we kind of want to make them some kind of superhero champion of the faith, and we kind of just throw them up, to be a beacon of something. And a lot of times people are like, nah, man, I'm just trying to believe. And
Mm.
I'm just figuring this thing out. And we just want them to kind of come in and be, an Avenger, a Christian Avenger or something like that. And it's like, let them sit down, let them grow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't put that weight on them to need to be a leader. Like, we're not looking for that from them. Like, I don't need Kanye to come in and be a leader. Like, he's not an elder, right? He's
Mm-hmm.
not a deacon or an elder in the body of Christ, right? That's not who he is. I'm not looking to him for that. But
Mm.
unfortunately, because we have this hero complex, and it's not new, right? It's throughout the scripture, people of Israel said, give us a king, right? And that's how we end up with Saul, and later David, and so on and so forth, right? We have this complex where we want to prop people up. We want to
Mm.
prop them up. And so I think that it's a hodgepodge of all of these different things that makes it very difficult, to navigate those waters of, like, the celebrity that professes faith and makes music or walks through their conversion or semi-conversion
Mm-hmm.
publicly.
Right.
Because a lot of times, if we had our lives in the public eye when we were converting or
Mm.
walking through our babe phase,
Right.
right? Like, people would say all kinds of things about us, and they had probably back then.
Right.
I can remember when I was 16 and making that turn to faith, and I was 100% in, but guess what? I didn't stop cussing overnight. You know what I mean? Like, I don't cuss now, but when I got off the Greyhound bus 2 weeks later, I still cussed every now and then. You feel me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't come up out of that baptismal water and never sinned again, right? But my posture towards sin changed, where it wasn't okay anymore for me to do things that I believe were against God's word. You know what I'm saying? Doesn't mean I never struggled with porn. I never struggled with lust after that date. It doesn't mean I never coveted something and wanted something that I wasn't supposed to have. It doesn't mean I didn't have anger in my heart and committed murder in my heart ever again, right? It didn't mean I never elevated something higher than I need to be where it conflicted with the Lord's kingship in my life, right? It didn't mean that I never failed in loving my neighbor as myself, right? None of it just doesn't run away from you. Sin just doesn't run away, because you decide that you want to pursue faith, but it's a process of sanctification that over time he works those good things in you. And because now our nature has changed when we come up out that water baptism,
Yeah.
our posture towards sin is like, nah, I hate my sin. I don't love that sin anymore. I don't want that,
Mm-hmm.
And so now I can repent and I can seek the Spirit to strengthen me to fight against those things and not be controlled by those things. But
Right.
yet and still, if somebody saw me in my weak moments, right? Like, we see a lot of these converting popular people, then they probably would have said a lot of the same negative things.
Mm.
Right.
Right.
But being a believer, in my opinion, is about God looking at us and seeing righteousness, the righteousness of Christ. That's what makes us Christians. That's what makes us believers and followers of the Messiah, in the way that we don't depend on our righteousness for salvation.
Right.
Right? We have a keen understanding that we're imperfect, we're fallen, we screw it up, man. Like, we don't get it right all the time, even though when we try, and then sometimes we don't even try to get it right, but we can get it right. And there's an
Right.
opportunity for us to pursue the things of God and to get back on track, to get where we need to go, by the power of the Spirit. And so yeah, all I had to say, I think that it's a lot of things that contribute to what makes it very difficult in those situations.
Yeah.
And I think that there's enough blame and enough sin to go around for all parties involved.
Right.
But thank God for His grace, and that
Right.
His mercies are new each day.
Right. So who would you consider the CHH GOAT? Like,
Oh man, yeah, I think Yeah, I hate doing favorites and I hate doing best because I
Mhm.
think it's so subjective. You know what I
It
mean?
is. Well, that's
But
why I said, who do you?
yeah, I think yeah, no, I got you. And I think that when it comes to greatest versus best, the difference that difference makes it a little easier
Mm,
because I think that greatest includes accomplishments and impact. Those are measurable things. That's not
right,
based on
right,
subjectivity,
right,
right? And so you may be able to say somebody's the best rapper based on their technical skill and what you've seen them practice. But you can't call the best person the greatest unless they have the accomplishments and a resume to back that thing up. That's
right.
why that's why, in my opinion, people shouldn't be out here debating whether or not Jay-Z's the greatest of all time when it
Mm,
comes to secular hip hop.
right.
I don't I don't think it's possible to argue that anymore. Argue against it. I think you can argue against him being the best rapper of all time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
Right.
from a skill and technical point, or from a song making perspective. But in terms of song making, writing combined with achievements and impact on culture, all of those things combined, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it's close when it comes to that. And it's for that reason that I would say Lecrae is within Christian hip hop.
Mm,
It's the same reason why I think that I would have to say that it's Jay-Z.
mm-hmm.
Um, I would have to say that it's Lecrae because when I look at what he sacrificed, when I look at, you know, what he has accomplished and given, um, and the impact that he's had on the culture. And also when I look at his ability as a lyricist,
Right.
as a writer, as a song maker,
Mm-hmm.
and his ability to then cultivate in others and replicate that over a span of a couple of decades at this point,
Yeah.
almost. You know what I'm saying? Like for me, whether or not he your favorite or not, don't again, like whether or
Yeah.
not you think he the best or he's the favorite or not,
Right.
I think that the data shows that he is.
Right.
But he's also one of my favorites. I have a lot of favorites though from
Okay.
back in the day all the way to today and what's
Right.
being
Right.
released today. So yeah, man.
I have another question.
Uh
Can we do a part two?
huh.
I promise you, I had so much stuff like to go over, man. But this is going so like I'm gonna tell you why I appreciate you so much, right? Because I've done interviews with these artists, and so many of them, they're newer artists, So I'm even learning,
Yeah,
even from interviews. But what I've always like, man, why do I have to pull teeth to get
yeah, yeah,
these
yeah,
answers, or for
yeah.
you to just express whatever you're feeling? And now I finally have it, and it's like, oh, it's like a wonder. I'm like, I really am gonna enjoy watching this back, and I can't wait for people to see it. But I got so much more to just kind of cover,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's time is just flying by, man.
It is. It is.
And
I can't believe it's 3 o'clock. I can't believe it's
right,
yeah.
and it's like they're telling me, and I got a few more minutes left. I said, okay, I need to do a part two. So if it's possible, can we link again next Sunday?
Yep. That should work.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, we can swing that. Let me just confirm some things, but yeah, that sounds like a plan.
Okay. And we're gonna get into some more stuff, man. I just want to say I appreciate you, bro. Um, and this is gonna be great. Just thank you for your time. And for those watching, man, part two is coming. I wanted him to say it on camera so I can hold him to it even more.
No, we're gonna definitely get that part two in, man. It's
Okay,
it's been
good.
good just chopping it up and talking through. Even if it's not next Sunday, we'll
Right.
make something
Oh
happen.
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. So it's been good talking to you, man, and
yeah,
try to be as open as possible, and
yeah.
and we'll go from there. So no, I appreciate it, bro.
Speaking on the 919, your career to the side. Cat, 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 cackle, cackle, lackey style. Cat, 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 cackle, cackle.